the Bigfoot community needs to take a long look at itself. At the end of the day, we're after this mystery. And I think it goes back to the saying of you got to be good with it or without it. There's no guarantee that some of the stuff will turn out the way we want it to.
You're listening to the Cryptid Crew podcast. I'm your host, Mark Childers. Before we get started, if you've had an encounter or an experience or just something unexplained, click on our link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening to the Cryptid Crew podcast. On this episode of the Cryptid Crew podcast, I would like to introduce 14 researcher, effects artist, and one half of Anomalous Midwest, Collier Wilmes. Collier, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Been looking forward to this show and kind of continue our discussion we had on the phone just a couple of days ago. Let's just kind of dive right into this. We've had some major headlines regarding the Patterson-Gimlin film recently surfaced with a film directed by Mark Evans, with a Q, by the way, called Capturing Bigfoot, and portrays it as being a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, Collier, give me your opinion on the Patterson-Gimlin film and what you know about the latest documentary.
Well, basically, for like most people, that was kind of like my entry point to Bigfoot for the longest time. Like most people grew up with it on every documentary being broken down, how it couldn't have been faked, how it could be faked. I feel like I speak for a lot of other people for it was like a focal point, kind of like a thing you could point to and be like, there's some mystery still left in the world. And for the longest time, it was like a thing of I wanted to believe. I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be an actual Bigfoot they filmed. Do you want me to give the basic alleged story around this documentary?
Yes, go ahead.
So it seems like the main selling point of this documentary is that there has been extra footage unearthed that basically, to put it in the film world's lingo, it looks like it's test footage for the Patterson film, is what it's being labeled as, or as some people would probably be calling it, a rehearsal. As of recording right now, I have not seen the actual alleged test rehearsal footage yet, like most people. I'm gonna guess it probably at minimum will be 6 months from this point, today being March, before we actually see any inkling of this footage, because right now it's having to go through all the festival run until they secure a distributor. But we have a pretty good play-by-play from Eric, I believe is his name, at Harryman Roads. Am I good to shout him out?
Absolutely.
Who actually went to South by Southwest, and he gave play-by-play, and from what it sounds like, the story they're going with is Cliff Patterson has been wanting to come forward for a while now as Patty being a hoax. And now it's the rehearsal footage has surfaced as well. And so him, Bob Hieronymus, and they're trying to get Bob Gimlin to come forward with it being a hoax. And it seems like from what it sounds like, the main instigator behind it was Al Diatley. If that was the case, a mix of like how it shapes up with the story of, because we know Al Diatley, he was not a good man from all accounts. He was very much a money grubbing individual, especially since he seems like he was the main profiteer off of the film, mixed with how Eric seemed to have responded to the content of this film. Not looking good, guys. Not looking good, because allegedly this footage, it looks like Patty. It has all the markings that Patty had. It's just on a different person. Because in this footage, it's alleged to be Al Diatley himself in the suit, which I think I'm with everybody. We're waiting with bated breath just to see the actual footage and to see, okay, are we going to see all the markers that everybody's been pointing to over the past 60 years? Is that going to be in this? Um, or is this just going to be a case where, because I know the big talking point is, oh, well, we know Roger Patterson was shooting footage of a suit for recrees for his doc. Will all that be there? Or will it be like clearly like what a lot of us in Bigfoot world have known for years, just packaged differently? 20% of me holds out hope that it will still be undetermined, but I feel like unlike most people, I won't lose any sleep if it's a hoax.
That film, has been extensively scrutinized for
Mm-hmm.
what 58 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no doubt in the Bigfoot research field that that's an iconic and
Mm-hmm.
foundational piece of footage. But and I want to get your opinion on this. Even though that people have attempted to replicate that particular piece of film, which I think what lasts 59 seconds or somewhere in that neighborhood total,
Mm-hmm.
that they have not been able to do it. And or I haven't seen anything that has
Mm-hmm.
come close to it. We've got muscle definition, and you've got some markers that are still there. I think they have one of the stumps they call Smiley that is
Mm-hmm.
still in the piece of footage. But of course, the area looks totally different now. It's grown up,
Mm-hmm.
somewhat, but from what I've seen. But tell me what you think about that aspect of it. As far as, is there human gait there, or is that just another creature with a different type of gait, longer
Yeah.
arms, and does it fit with the gentleman you mentioned, or Bob Hieronymus as well, because he had mentioned also that he wore the
Mm-hmm.
suit,
Yeah.
uh, or Patterson offered him money, back then.
Yeah. Yeah. The allegedly offered him money, which that's part of the instigator as to why he came forward. Is that he never got paid. He got screwed over by both Patterson and probably more likely Diatley, from the sounds of it, because it sounds like Diatley was notorious for screwing people over. Because yeah, that's a thing topic I have definite opinions on. Because the main narrative is there was no technology available like that at the time. You didn't have like the complex uh, costuming we do now, where today you're building a suit like that. You're basically going to build it where you have an undersuit that is all the muscle definition, where it's basically sculpted foam pouched in like spandex pouches and constructed in a way that like yeah, floating muscles that simulate that pulling and stretching you have, and how anatomy works. Um, for a long time, it's the narrative has been that way. Problem I have with that is we did have complex suits like that back then. If you look to 2001: A Space Odyssey, well, when I say this, I'm not by any means saying that Patterson took that suit and used it. I'm just establishing that there is precedence that there were complex suits back then. Those suits were way ahead of a lot of what was being used in Hollywood, um, because they were definitely way more advanced than the Planet of the Apes makeups that were being used and the suits. The few times you did see them in full ape suit in the Planet of the Apes series, and that was shot in '67, which would have been around the time that Patterson did the infamous film. So there is precedence there. As for what Patterson would have done, that's still the big question. That's the thing I'm most excited about to see with this new footage, because allegedly this footage is way more clearer. So there might have been a thing of, if it was, as they're saying, this is the Patty suit just worn by a different person, that might show a little bit more of the sins, so to speak. um, as to why they probably fine tuned it and been like, okay, so we need the camera to be this far away and we need to shake it this much more. And that might show as to how the suit might have been constructed. Because I've heard so many theories from people who are on the suit side, ranging from it's just is what it is. It's the Morris costume that was allegedly bought and altered to, I've heard as grim ones as people theorizing they caught a black bear and flayed it and that dude's wearing a black bear skin suit. Yeah, that's probably the most outrageous claim. Um, I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know if you could pay anyone enough to be like, all right, just slip into this black bear skin suit.
Yeah,
But that
not
gives you an
myself.
idea
There's
of
not
like,
enough money for that. Yes.
yeah, I don't know either. That's the part I'm looking forward to and excited to the most with this documentary coming out. Will we be able to kind of tell, okay, once and for all, how was this constructed? It's hard to say because I know a lot of the discourse is, okay, well, if it was a suit, where's the suit? Well, let's go with Clint's story because Clint claims that Patterson burned it in a barrel in the backyard, piece by piece. So there's as a convenient reason as to where the suit is. But if we're going to be generous and say they kept the suit afterwards, okay, let's assume they used a conventional means of where they had like the mask that I have here. I had sculpted this in clay, molded it, and it's a latex skin. So it's flexible, it's rubber, it's like a Halloween mask, just with more love and attention put into it. If this has been worn multiple times with somebody sweating in it, that sweat is going to accelerate the natural processes that latex goes through because latex isn't forever, even if you keep good care of it. Eventually, these things rot away. And Patterson, if he was the hoaxer, would not have taken good care of it because why would he? He got his what he needed out of it. It was going to be gone within 5 to 10 years. Being generous here. So that explains where the suit is. That's kind of my 2 cents so far on it. It's much information available at the time of this recording.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Collier, and going back to Bob Hieronymus, his alleged being Patty, I guess, and at the time, Patterson supposedly, through Bob's statement or testimony, offered him $1,000 to wear the suit.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, Patterson was struggling financially,
Mm-hmm.
which can make sense. You know, you can take this kind of both ways. Oh, he's struggling financially. So, of course, he wants to make something where a film or documentary where he could make, you know, quite a bit of money. But also, $1,000 in the late '60s is roughly, you know, $9,000 or $10,000 now, and that's not pocket change. So
Mm-hmm.
would Patterson, you know, offer that knowing he could not pay it, or
Oh,
is
sure, he could
Bob's
have.
story just okay, or is Bob's story just a complete, you know, fabrication?
Yeah. It's hard to say, of course, without having Patterson still alive. Um, but if the accounts are to be trusted, a lot of people did describe Roger, let's be honest, as a bit of a huckster. But that's also, again, the main point of this documentary, from what we've heard, is that the money guy was actually Al Diatley. So yeah, Roger probably was, by all accounts, dirt poor. Um, which is not a new thing in the film world. And he did have ties to the film world. He had Hollywood connections. A lot of directors actually are pretty dirt poor, let's be honest. That's the whole like struggling artist thing. And commonly you would secure a finance guy, which seems like Al Diatley was the finance guy. And going back to how he was a bit of somebody who would screw other people over. Sure, Roger could have promised paying Bob Hieronymus with the intent of paying him, and probably got kiboshed by Al being like, nah, we're not going to pay him. Because there was a pretty damning quote from that documentary from one of the cousins in the Patterson family that was talking to Al, and Al told him, "You want to know how you get ahead in life? You screw over your assistants."
If that's, what he said, I can totally see what you're saying. To me, it's really hard to say without seeing the documentary, of course. But I'm going to
It
ask
really
you
is.
this: yes, just by knowing what you know now and seeing what you have seen and read, uh, as far as the Patterson-Gimlin film, seeing it itself, and hearing what's come out recently, if you were an attorney and you wanted to try this in front of a jury as a hoax, what evidence besides hearsay, would you have? You don't have the suit. Do you have anything as to it being a hoax?
Well, again, it'll just all come down to that footage, because if it's to be believed, by the people that saw it, who say it's clearly Patty, just worn by a different person, it's probably going to come down to when we see this footage, and we'll probably be able to see, okay, it has the clear markings down the back that we all point to. It has the clear, like, I know some people talked about the herniations in the legs, the musculature, anatomical features. It's going to come down to that. Which is really as far as this whole debate and this whole conversation goes, it's really hard to talk about that at the point we're at, where we're yet to see it publicly.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. I'm just going off of what we know now.
Mm-hmm. Which is tough because we're all reeling from this.
For sure. Yeah, it's something that, like I said earlier, it's a foundational piece for Bigfoot research or for that subject. And I'm going to pull this up. I've got about a 6 or 7 second clip of Patty walking.
Mm-hmm.
And for the listeners, I guess I probably should explain this a little bit further. Initially, 1967, Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson went out on basically a 2-week journey and trying to record a Bigfoot or investigate the subject of Bigfoot. And towards the end of that journey, this 59-second film that they recorded became probably the most scrutinized film in history, or one of them. And I've got about 7 seconds of it here, and I'll play it twice, and then we'll talk about it, Collier, after this. Yeah, that's a iconic piece of footage. Not the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, of course, but tell me what you think about it. Give me your opinion of that.
It's again, it's like one of those things that it's something we all pointed to, and really, if it is a hoax, I want to know how they did it. I want to know how he did it. Um, because that is what a piece of craftsmanship. It's really hard to kind of, because it just feels so natural. It feels like one piece. I think that's why it's been so hard to really debunk it up until this point, is the fact that it seems so seamless. And I
It
wonder if
truly
part of it
does.
is that maybe he constructed it in a way that the seams were probably in the most easy to hide spots, and due to the fact that how grainy the footage is.
I believe it was a 16 millimeter camera that they were using at the
Six,
time.
from what I heard, a bit of a back and forth. I think it was 16 millimeter, but the main discussion is, okay, what lens was he using at the time? Because the model I believe he was using, it was one of those that had a rotating lens feature where you could switch between different lenses.
Yeah, that like you had mentioned just previously, the gate or the whole the whole thing seems, like you said, so natural and so fluid.
Hmm. Yeah.
And just the movements, even the look
Mhm.
back. And of course, I think the famous number of that particular frame is 352, I believe.
Yeah,
But
352 or 355.
right, it's just it's really hard to say. I'm so initially, I think when we talked, I said I was not going to watch the documentary, but I've got to
Mhm.
watch it. Um, to see what evidence is there, if any,
Yeah.
besides strictly hearsay.
Yeah, which I know a lot of people are kind of in that same boat where they don't want to watch it. They don't want to give it the time of day, but I think that opens up the conversation to the Bigfoot community, regardless of how this turns out. I think it kind of shows that the Bigfoot community needs to take a long look at itself because at the end of the day, we're after this mystery. And I think it goes back to the saying of you got to be good with it or without it because there's no guarantee that some of the stuff will turn out the way we want it to because a lot of people circle their whole belief system on this phenomena around that footage, which, yeah, just because it hasn't been debunked up to this point doesn't mean it can't be debunked. The best case scenario we have with this footage is we can't explain it. And even when we can't explain it, that doesn't prove the phenomena. So we need to be able to be good whether it's a hoax or whether it's not a hoax. And quite frankly, if it turns out to be a hoax, I think that's probably better for the community because for a long time it's been held back by the fact that nothing measures up to this footage. So if this is a hoax, that means we need a complete restart as far as opinions and as far as thoughts around this phenomenon.
Right, exactly. And the you know the thing that keeps a lot of people going and interested in the subject is the mystery of it.
Hmm.
And I've talked to people before that, if they were to find a Bigfoot or capture a Bigfoot, or I'm going to say alive because I don't know how many people would believe it if there was a body found. Does the majority want that? Will that just delete the mystery of it all? Or
Um, I think that comes down to what is the nature of this phenomena at play. I think a part of what's possibly could happen, should this be proven to be a hoax, is it might open the door to some of the stranger sides of the Bigfoot phenomena that people for so long were like, don't want to think about it, don't want to acknowledge it. The woo crowd, as it's been labeled, because I think that will come with being forced into a complete restart. And if it's something that you can document that phenomena, I think that leaves a more mystery.
sure, there's two camps, and there may be more than two camps, but the most popular are the flesh and blood
Hmm.
and the woo. And for the longest time, I was flesh and blood, but there's some things that you just can't explain. That a track way, and then the tracks stop for no known reason, and
Hmm.
just
And then mystery
some of the
lights.
orbs or lights. Yeah, exactly. You said it there. The mystery lights. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about those, Collier?
Well, kind of like you, I actually did start out with the more flesh and blood side of things because I'm a nerd at heart. One of my favorite movies of all time is the classic 33 King Kong. I love Planet of the Apes. Apes in general are my favorite animal. So, of course, it was like the best idea to think, oh, there's an 8 foot tall mystery ape just hiding on the edges of civilization. Um, but as I kind of, my wife and I have more seriously dug into a lot of the stories, both the indigenous folklore along with people's accounts, there is a sizable chunk of people that have accounts that are more in line with high strangeness. It's hard to say that how sizable that account is truly due to certain organizations liking to pick and choose what they data they post.
Yes, I've talked to several people that, there let me backtrack just a little bit. The BFRO website has, I think it's over 5,000 reports, anywhere from Class A or Class B, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, half of Class A, which are
Hmm.
actual visual, you know, encounters or
Hmm.
sightings of a creature.
Yeah, and I believe there's
And
Class
some of
C
the
for only footprints.
but some of the people I've talked with and that have come to me, I believe them 100% what they're saying. They had some sort of encounter or sighting, because you can tell by somebody's
Hmm.
body language or emotion, when they're telling the story, that it was organic, or it's real. Whether it's woo or whether it's flesh and blood, they saw something. They had an encounter
Hmm.
with a creature that's bipedal, hairy, large, and supposedly does not exist.
Yeah, supposedly, or at least what we're told. Um, and yeah, there's like people that have even further, like how I was just reading an article about like a lot of high strangeness phenomena in general being preceded by a flash of green light, which certainly crosses over into Bigfoot sightings with a certain subsection. One thing I've always toyed was, could both exist? Does one really negate the other? Like one thing I say is me and my wife joke that we have a ghost cat that roams our apartment. Um, does that mean all cats are ghosts? No. And if ghost phenomena is true, could Bigfoot have ghosts? Uh, if we dig into the UFO phenomenon, like screen memory, could there be like glitches in screen memory where Bigfoot are a natural creature that lives and breathes on this planet? Would they pull from that screen memory, not realizing that to us we don't accept it as reality? There's a lot of hypotheticals and questions you can pose here when you dig into this phenomena, and especially since we don't know about how it operates.
Well, there's definitely no expert on the subject. You can call yourself an expert, but it's just you go by what you hear,
Hmm.
encounters, and there's some evidence. Tracks, tree breaks, or structures that are debated but are there. And I'm guessing too, you have an occasional unknown hair sample or something like that. And there's pictures, and people have asked me, where's the pictures? Where's the video? There's videos
Hmm.
and pictures that are out there, and if you scroll enough online, you're going to see something, and more than likely, you're going to see uh, a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Some of them may be hoaxes, but there's going to be some out there that is legitimate footage, I believe.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and we're just gonna have to kind of reassess a lot of things, as far as what's out there. Like a lot of, but the bulk of them being so blurry, it's hard to really use a lot of that as good evidence. Going back to the whole
True.
like
Yeah,
court
there.
analogy, a lot of Bigfoot like footage out there cannot be used in court or even get you to a court case, unfortunately. Just to be frank, saying that as experience being a security officer as well and dealing with sometimes when like you just have like a instance happen and you're dealing with police officers and they're like, well, we really can't do anything because the footage is so grainy, can't move forward with anything.
Let me ask you this, Collier. Are there any other uh, footages, pictures, or anything besides the Patterson-Gimlin film that spark your attention as far as or make you lean, hey, this is for real? The Freeman footage, or the I know we had talked before we started the recording about the Honey Island swamp monster, but
Hmm.
any
It's
of
really hard
those or other ones?
yeah. I was gonna say the Freeman footage. That would probably be for a lot of Bigfooters out there the fallback after the Patterson film. I know a lot of people question Freeman and his character. As far as I can tell, I have not done as much digging into Freeman as I have with Patterson recently. The worst thing that's ever happened to Freeman, it seems, is that just lack of knowledge, and unfortunately, because I know a lot of people decried him after he claimed hair samples, and those hair samples turned out to be fibers that are used commonly in upholstery. Um, which I believe Meldrum even said that that could have just been an unfortunate circumstance where he came across them not even aware of what they were. Because what happens commonly is people just dump furniture out in the wild, and as it decays, these strands of fibers become airborne, and he just could have come across it and assumed it was Bigfoot hair. So I think the Freeman footage might be another case to be made for that. I don't know as much about the Hotney Island swamp monster, and knowing that I think, if I believe and I remember correctly, that footage was from the same guy who did found those alleged tracks. No, yeah, so that might be another case where it might be scrupulous at best, especially considering I don't know if how that fits with the traditional Sasquatchery because the footprints looked a little bit more Gatoroid than the traditional Sasquatch track. And when you get into, would this even be the same type of
Yeah,
creature?
right. Yeah, the Honey Island swamp monster was the footage showed something bipedal, and the
Hmm.
tracks looked to me like a almost like reptilian.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's like one of those things where even if it's we were to look at it, there's no biological precedent for it. There is no mix of like, okay, there is, but there isn't. We don't have any modern animals that have precedent for having both mammalian and reptilian features. If you want to be generous, though, going into paleontology, we do go back far enough. You have synapsids back in the pre-dinosaur times. I believe they are in the Permian era when they popped up, which were kind of the proto mammals. But even then, you don't have any precedent for any of them being hominid in any way. They were, at best, more saber-toothed tiger like. And of course, there's the Dimetrodon, which everybody points to as a dinosaur, but it's not a dinosaur. But that's a whole different thing that I will not get sidetracked on.
Collier, let's transition into something else. You're in Iowa,
Hmm.
and I guess you could call it the. To me, it's legendary. It's the Van Meter sightings or the Van Meter visitor that happened in 1903, and there were
Hmm.
a rash of sightings in a short time, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah, one
in
could
Van
almost
Meter,
even call it like
Iowa.
a proto Mothman.
Yes, the descriptions that I have read and seen are, wings shaped like a bat, and
Hmm.
it sounded very similar to the Mothman of Point Pleasant, or I guess you could say Chicago sightings as well. What
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Basically, as you said, in 1903, the town of Van Meter was being besieged in a way by sightings of this, what they called an antediluvian monster. It was seen by a lot of the very reputable people in the town. Like one was a owner of the munitions factory. There was a teller at the bank. The town doctor and the town teacher even saw it. It was the teacher that actually coined the term that it looked like an antediluvian monster, which at that time was what they were using to describe like dinosaurs. So I think that's why a lot of people tangle it up as like being maybe it was a pterosaur of some sort. And the town basically tracked it down to the local mines where they saw two of these creatures, the bigger one that they've been seeing and a smaller one come out of the mine and then basically fly off to where there was this almost like final showdown between the town and these creatures that sounded like Satan and an army of imps preparing for war. And they were bulletproof, apparently. The town tried shooting at it. The bullets had no effect. And it's kind of up in the air to what happened. Some people say they cornered them in the mine and blasted the entrance, trapping them in. Some people say they just flew off and never returned.
One of the things I read about it that intrigued me was the light that they
Hmm.
saw when the creature appeared. And it seemed like
Yeah,
to me, I guess, in the description that the light was maybe above the head of the creature or
yeah. On the forehead, I believe, that emitted a blinding light. Because that's what people thought initially. It was like robbers preparing, because all they could see was a light bouncing from rooftop to rooftop. They thought it was just robbers preparing to rob the bank.
right. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, like you had said, one of the doctors, the town doctor, uh,
Mhm.
had a sighting, one of the business owners, and they had fired multiple shots with pistols at the creature,
Yeah,
but no effect whatsoever.
yeah. It was first. It was the bank teller that shot at it because he saw it outside the bank and shot at it with a shotgun, I believe. To which it disappeared, and they found tracks that they casted, three-toed tracks. Um, then the doctor had a sighting when he was in bed, and he basically went out back, and he said he shot at it and it emitted this odor that knocked him out. And that's when the town school teacher came in. He saw it, and that's when it flew off as the train was coming by.
Interesting. Yeah, that mystery has never been solved. And
Mm-mm.
have there been any more sightings that you know of in that area?
There has been future sightings actually that were documented because it was initially outlined in Chad Lewis, Kevin Lee Nelson, Noah Voss's book on the visitor, and since um, writing that book, more people came forward with sightings that they outlined in this book, along with the fact that there has been a cryptid called the Iowa Dragon. It's not that far of a stretch to sit and point out the similarities between the visitor and dragon-like creatures. So, and in fact, I find it more believable the fact that the visitor fell into obscurity soon after those reports were outlined in the newspaper. Should they be true, that more people were seeing it, but since they didn't know what the Van Meter visitor was, they had to find something else to describe it. So, of course, a dragon would be a very apt way of describing it.
When's the
There was
last
even
reported sighting of either one of those creatures, or if it's the same?
the last one I remember in the book's outline was there was one in Colfax where somebody had seen a dragon-like creature. But although I have heard rumblings of people seeing a dark pterodactyl-like creature fly overhead in small Iowa towns. Unfortunately, those reports couldn't be investigated too much because the witnesses would prefer to remain anonymous and don't really want to talk to many people.
I'm going to show you this video. Um, if I can pull it up, may not be able to. It happened in Idaho. I believe this is it here. Okay, here we go. Tell me what you think about this.
Oh yeah, I believe this one has been debunked as a hoax.
Has it?
Um, yeah, I believe just the way it moves, it doesn't seem very natural. Plus, since this is a pterosaur, this has not stood up to the test of time as far as what we know about pterosaur biology and mechanics. The wings come to a little bit much of a sharp point, I believe, as far as my understanding goes of paleontology and paleo art and reconstructions. The tips of pterosaur wings actually aren't as sharply pointed as illustrated in that one. Also, even though it's hard to tell because it's so far away, you can see evident shrink wrapping, as it's been called by people in paleo art circles, where the creatures basically looks like the skin is shrink wrapped to the skeleton. As we know with actual animal biology, there would be layers of fat and muscle around the skeleton. So that looks a little bit too much like a hoax.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I knew AI was not a player in 2015 when that was recorded.
Mhm.
Uh, but and I'd heard someone else say that it did not look natural as far as the movement. But of
Yeah.
course, it's something that if you've never seen in person anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to get your opinion on that because I always thought that was a very interesting piece of film.
I would say it looks to me kind of like a CG hoax. A good CG hoax, mind you. Uh, because they did go to the layer to at least make it look like it belongs in the camera. But what gives it away to me is the fact that it does that weird little dive bomb like loop. It just doesn't look natural to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, what's up?
Um, let me ask you this: what do you think? What do you think the Van Meter visitor is?
Oh, that's where I love to get into the speculation of it all. I think it's a case of like proto classic high strangeness phenomena. I don't think it's a biological entity. Um, I think it has a lot in common with the Mothman lore because there's a lot of weird like ufology stuff that pops up because they note the fact that it smelled sulfurous and that's what knocked that dude out. So you have a case of like basically what we know from ufology where somebody losing time and the fact that this winged creature with a glowing appendage popped up and riled up this town and just disappeared almost into the ether in a way. It just came and gone. Um, I think this is a case of paraphysical phenomena at play, to be honest.
Do you think those two things? I'm saying these two things, Mothman and the Van Meter visitor, are the same.
I don't know about that per se. Of course, the Mothman is like the closest like benchmark descriptor we have, but that's also not knowing how this phenomena works exactly. Because let's be honest, high strangeness and all of its many masks that it wears, it loves to break the rules of how we understand the world around us. Um, so whether that's a case to be built for paraphysical phenomena or just hoaxing and yellow journalism, that's kind of where it likes to operate. Um, I think it's like a weird case of it lines up in an area where there is weird geography and weird, possibly electromagnetic fields. I was just reading a article the other day that my wife had found that said that red bricks are great for conducting energy. And what was it that was right next to the mine? It was a red brick and tile factory. And in fact, you still see these bricks. I actually have one right here. This is a brick from Van Meter pulled right out of the ground. Could there be something at play to where the energy that generates this type of phenomena could have been inadvertently stored in the very bricks that this town was built on? And it just took some unknown factor to to ignite the bomb in a way. I don't know. That's kind of the part of the phenomena I like. I like to speculate and think about off the wall things that most people wouldn't know about or wouldn't think or dare to conceive.
Yes, outside the box. Sometimes you got to think outside the box,
Hmm.
especially with cryptids. Because it's a total mystery for the most part. Have you heard of any recent Bigfoot sightings or cryptid sightings in your area or in Iowa, for that matter?
In Iowa, I would love to say yes, which there are. I can't disclose where though at this moment. Active research and all. I'm sure you understand.
I would love to hear about that down the road.
Oh, I do know there's a lot of great stuff going on in Ohio, though. Man, does it seem to be popping off there?
There's been a lot of sightings recently. I think it was he stated 8
Yep.
in what 5 days or 6 to 7 days maybe.
I believe it was 5 to 6, yeah. And then they got a meteor or two on top of that.
I did not hear about that. What part of Ohio?
I haven't looked too much into it. Most of my time has been sucked into this Patterson stuff. I didn't get to look into
Yeah,
where it hit. I just know from what I understand, some people were like, what was with that boom? Apparently a meteor hit.
that's pretty
I don't think it
awesome.
was a populated area.
Right. Well, Collier, at the end of each episode, I do a rapid fire Q&A where I will ask you 3 questions, and it's just the first thing that comes to your mind. Pretty
All right.
casual.
All right. I'm
All
ready.
right, here we go. Number 1, favorite cryptid.
I mean, isn't it obvious? I
I
mean, for
believe
Pete's
so.
sake,
That's the king of cryptids right there.
I have a whole vest committed to this guy.
Pretty cool, and that's some good work there you did on that
I
mask.
appreciate it. This is probably one of my favorite, one of my best sellers, really,
Number 2, if you were a superhero, which one would you be?
of like pre-existing superheroes.
We'll say DC or Marvel.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Does it have to be a hero, or can it be a villain?
You can be a villain.
I'm going to be the Condiment King.
Have not heard of that one.
He's a Batman villain. He literally just goes around spraying people with ketchup and mustard.
Actually, Batman's probably my favorite.
He has the best
Number
rogues
3,
gallery.
yes. Number 3, with nothing going on during the day, what's your go-to movie?
It's probably Legend of Boggy Creek for me.
That's a good one. Well, Collier, thank you for coming on the show, taking your time out of your schedule to come on here and discuss the Patterson-Gimlin film and the Van Meter visitor from your
Appreciate you
state.
having me.
Absolutely. Tell everybody where they can find you guys and keep up with what you're doing.
Well, you can find us at Anomalous Midwest on Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky. You can also find me at collier.1330 or collier.art1330 on Instagram.
Gotcha. I will put those links in the description for the listeners to check out and see what y'all are doing and keep up with you. And again, thank you for coming on. And once this documentary comes out, I'd like to do a part 2 on this.
I would love to do it. I'm game. I can't wait.
Yes, that sounds good. Looking forward to it. And for the listeners, if you've had an encounter or something strange or unexplainable, email us at the Cryptid Crew Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless.